Welcome back to Askewed Reviews, and today we have another fan request, and it is for the 1983 action adventure fantasy sci-fi Krull. Here is your trivia question for today. What is Ergo the Magnificent's full slogan or description that he gives himself? The answer will be at the end of this video. Some years ago, a vessel arrived on the planet Krull, and within the vessel was a creature known as the Beast. And the Beast had an army of slayers that he used to start taking over the world. Now, in one of the pockets of the world where the Beast had not assumed full control yet, a wedding was happening between Prince Colwyn and Princess Lissa, where their two kingdoms would come together to join forces against the Beast. However, the Beast took the opportunity to send his slayers to interrupt the wedding. The slayers managed to kidnap the princess and kill pretty much all of the party guests, leaving only Colwyn, who they presumed was dead. Colwyn is then found by Aenir, the Old One, who helps get him back to health and tells him about the quest he must journey on now. With Colwyn now being the king, he must seek out the fabled glaive that will give him the power he needs to defeat the beast. After journeying up a mountain and dipping his hand into lava, Colwyn is able to retrieve the glaive. Colwyn must now seek out the home of the beast, the Black Fortress, which disappears and reappears throughout the land. But this is also where Lissa is now imprisoned. Along his journeys, Colwyn meets Ergo the Magnificent, a wizard who seems to have some issues with using his abilities, as he continually changes himself into animals at the wrong moments. It's around this time that Colwyn and his friends run into a group of bandits led by Torquil, who is played by Alan Armstrong. Colwyn convinces them to become his army and join his cause. Two members of this bandit team are actually actors you probably recognize: Robbie Coltrane and Liam Neeson. Eventually, Colwyn's group is even joined by a very powerful ally, a Cyclops. Along the way, our group has to deal with all sorts of trials and tribulations, including the Widow in the Web, a crystal spider, quicksand, and even changelings. So will Colwyn and Lissa be reunited, or will the Beast get what he wants, which is Lissa as his bride? Peter Yates is the director for this film. The entire film was made in England at Pinewood Studios. It was one of the largest projects they had ever taken on, as they used 10 sound stages with 23 movie sets. There was a rumor for some time that the movie was actually a tie-in to the RPG game Dungeons and Dragons, but both Gary Gygax and TSR have both stated that they were never approached. So even though it is not connected to that game, it may have had some inspiration from it, but it is more than likely just another one of these sword and sorcery films that were very popular throughout the 80s. Ken Marshall, who plays Colwyn in this film, unfortunately really never got to be the main actor again after this movie. He put a lot of work into this as well. Not only did he do his own stunt work, but he trained in riding, fencing, and boxing, and he based his performance off of Errol Flynn. Lysette Anthony, who played Lissa in the film, absolutely hates this movie. Apparently, the two big reasons are: number one, she really didn't like how Lissa was just a helpless little girl, and the fact that they actually dubbed over her voice because they wanted the character to sound more American. She's not the only one, actually. Both her and Robbie Coltrane were dubbed over for this film. The Cyclops in the film is obviously very tall, and he's played by Bernard Bresslaw, who himself is 6'7", but he actually wore lifts to make him even taller for the character. Throughout the film, you see the army of Slayers. Did you happen to know that they actually made 40 Slayer costumes for this film? Did you happen to know what the quicksand was made out of that's in the swamp? Well, it was actually 4 tons of painted cork that's floating on water. Here's some interesting trivia related to the fire mares. It's stated in the movie that they can travel 1,000 leagues in a day. Now, due to the measurement of a league, that means that they can travel about 3,500 miles in a day at an average speed of 145 miles per hour. One of my favorite things about this film is definitely the practical effects. The spider on the webbing looked so very real, in my opinion. It was done in stop motion, but I thought they did a great job with that. Also, the changeling. Everything about the changeling scene, in my opinion, was absolutely terrifying. Krull definitely has a cult following to it, but I would have to say, more than anything, people know this movie due to one thing: the glaive. Now, a glaive in our world actually looks very different, as it's usually on some sort of pole and it's just a blade on the end. Now, the glaive as we know it in the film has shown up in so many different versions of media. For instance, in the video game Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, they have a weapon called the Kill Star. South Park, on their episode Fantastic Easter Special, Jesus has a glaive. And there's even the fact that in Ready Player One, the glaive is used as a weapon near the end of the film. There was actually a sequel planned for Krull, but it was never produced due to the poor box office results of the first film. I don't know if it would be too long now to have done a sequel at this point, but I do have to say, even though I love Krull, I feel it's one of the few movies from the 80s that could do really well as a full remake. Now, if you can't get enough Krull, there's definitely some options out there for you. There's a few different comic books. There was actually a video game for the Atari, but once again, it's the Atari, so it doesn't exactly look like Krull. There is a Krull pinball, and Parker Brothers even made a board game and a card game. So when it comes to the movie Krull, I loved it. As I mentioned before, it's one of those 80s sword and sorcery films, and in my opinion, it's one of the better ones. So I'm going to give this film a 4 out of 5. Now, as for the trivia question from the beginning of the episode, what is Ergo the Magnificent's full slogan or description that he gives himself? Ergo introduces himself as Ergo the Magnificent, short in stature, tall in power, narrow of purpose, and wide of vision. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews. If there's a movie you'd like to see get a review, just mention it in the comments. And as always, like, comment, share, and subscribe.